Decisions this week in both Washington and Tallahassee give us so much to discuss with our Powerhouse Roundtable today. So let's get right to the introductions.
All right, Marlene Hill, the gentleman you see here, Miami attorney with the Hamilton, Miller, and Berthasell firm, past president of the Caribbean Bar Association.
Justin Safey is publisher of the Safey Review, a daily roundup of political news and opinion from around the state. He is also an attorney. Veteran journalist Rosemary O'Hara is the editorial page editor of the Sun Sentinel. And regular roundtabler all, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Great to have you all come in. Justin, you have spent a good deal of time in Tallahassee. They are within a day or so of finishing up. Give them a grade. How have they done in this session? What have they done that mattered? What have they not done that should matter?
Well, I guess I would give them a B+. I think they've done a good job. We have a $83 billion with a B budget they're going to vote on tomorrow. Slight increase in school funding. You mentioned earlier on the earlier segment that big reservoir that they're going to build south of Lake Okeechobee.
That's a big deal.
It's a big deal for the environment to really stop some of those toxic water flows that were flowing out of the lake. So, you know, on environment, good. Education, pretty good. Healthcare, they did make some cuts to hospitals on the healthcare program. So, you know, but look, there's a limited resources that the state has, and I think overall on a lot of other issues. However, as you mentioned before, medical marijuana did not pass, gambling did not pass. Two big issues, very controversial, very different positions between the House and the Senate on both of those issues. So those are the two shortcomings I think everyone agrees upon.
Right.
And the transparency issue, I know, Rosemary, when you're writing editorials, transparency in government is kind of a critical thing.
Well, and Speaker Corcoran promised it was going to be the most transparent legislative session in the nation. And in the end, they reverted to smoke-filled rooms if they still allowed smoke in the rooms.
Is that even allowed in Florida?
No.
Inside?
But who knows what was happening in there because, you know, they never let us see. And so they come out with a budget that, what's in the budget? You know, who's seen the budget? They come out, education policy, who's seen it? But one thing, thank heavens, they stopped from happening was an effort to try to keep let local members of local government bodies also meet in secret like this. Yeah. So thank heaven that effort got destroyed. So, but I have a much lower grade for the legislature. I think that when you look at what it focused on, you know, charter schools, prayer in schools, it didn't feel like it didn't solve property insurance. So did they really solve the problems we sent them to settle? I didn't see it.
We get into trouble when we start talking about grading, right? Because
they're trying to eliminate it.
Education funding is not on the priority list, in my opinion, as stated by Superintendent Runcie in his editorial today in the Sun Sentinel. I really think that given that the Republicans have both houses and the governors, there would be a little bit more work on behalf of the 90 million citizens in the state of Florida. So I don't want to get into a grade. I'm waiting to see tomorrow, though, before I give the final exam.
Okay, see how they do tomorrow.
You know, what we really didn't cover in the first segment because of time, you just brought up, was the cuts to Medicaid. I mean, the public hospitals, the North Broward District, Jackson Health System. I mean, Justin, frame what kind of hit our public hospitals are taking, and not-for-profit hospitals as well.
Yeah, under the Medicaid program, under the budget that they're going to vote on tomorrow, and I assume they're going to vote to approve it tomorrow, there's several $100 million worth of cuts to the Medicaid program to hospitals in the state of Florida. So I believe for the North Broward Hospital District, it was over 10 or $18 million. I think for Jackson, I think
32 million for Jackson.
And
right, so it's significant.
Will the federal monies coming to the states take care of that? The hospital executive said no, it will not.
Well, that's another question. You know, I mean, Justin said, you know, we're dealing with limited resources here. In fact, there are more resources than we have had in recent years, you know, and our budgets reflect priorities and values. That's where I have a problem with exactly what it is that are we prioritizing in the state of Florida on behalf of all citizens. So we're going to be debating whether the bill that's going to be going to the Senate that was just passed in Congress, as to whether or not we're going to provide Medicaid expansion to the states.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, there is the possibility that there is a federal pot of money, about $1 billion worth, that could come to help Florida, but that's an unknown issue right now.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Rosemary, it seems to me, and I don't want to be harsh in my judgment, that Rick Scott was fairly ineffectual in the last few weeks. He went to Argentina for 4 days, just when the legislature could have heard from him, I think. And then he flew around the state the last couple of days trying to pressure constituents to call their lawmakers to fully fund Enterprise Florida, and that didn't happen either.
Right.
So I think, you know, it's his 7th year. You would think that he would have a better handle on how to deal with the legislature.
Right. Well, he's 3/4 of the way done, so he only has one more session to come. So he's starting to look at lame duck. That he spent all of his capital on one $250 million agency or funding for,
Right.
$83 billion budget. And the only thing that we really heard him talking about was $250 million for Enterprise Florida. Also Visit Florida. And it is unfortunate that the money that's meant for marketing our state isn't greater. But I think Florida hasn't seen a speaker of the strength and power of Richard Corcoran.
He would not bend.
Since Dempsey Barron. I mean, the power in Tallahassee, part of it is it's all one-party rule. I really think one-party rule is coming back to bite Republicans in Tallahassee. And in Tallahassee, Speaker Corcoran ran the table.
Yeah. Senator Anita Flores said earlier on in the earlier segment that we have to work harder at building relationships across the aisle. This is what happens, like you've said, you know, with single-party power. We have to work more in terms of identifying issues. This issue with Visit Florida and Enterprise Florida, the governor, for 7 years, had all this time to develop these relationships politically. It's not going to work by going into a studio of a radio station trying to appeal to persons in their local districts.
What if, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Justin,
Yeah.
what if this barnstorming was really Rick Scott getting out there and laying the groundwork for what comes next?
The Senate run.
Take it
Imagine
away,
that.
Justin.
Imagine that, an elected official thinking about what comes next.
Shocker.
And that should be said also about Speaker Richard Corcoran, who said in the papers this week that he may decide to run for governor next year. So I think that consideration was potentially a factor in what he was doing in terms of fighting against what he perceived to be corporate welfare with these funds from Enterprise Florida and Visit Florida going to help businesses. That's from his perspective.
Yeah.
So I think that the other thing I wanted to say about Governor Rick Scott is, look, and I worked for Governor Jeb Bush, probably the most difficult thing about being governor is dealing with the legislature. I think that's the most challenging part of being governor, because the agencies all report to you and you have a lot of control over that, but the legislature does not report to the governor, and they like their independence. So I think that, you know, each governor will figure that out. And at the same time, when you're in the 7th year of your governor's tenure, you're starting to become a lame duck. And
So what grade would you give him for managing those relationships?
So for managing the relationships, I'm going to take the Marlon Hill position. I'm not going to give him a grade.
Whoa.
Touche!
All right.
That
I'm
was
going to bring
very
a chalkboard
skillful.
to the next
I saw the scalpel come out, but I didn't even see it.
He's going to wait until Tuesday.
Yeah, that was good. All right. Well, we do want to talk about the American Health Care Act and its impact on Florida. So stay with us. We'll be back with more of the roundtable in just a minute. Welcome back live in our studio on this Sunday morning. Some very bright people here on our roundtable. Rosemary O'Hara, editor of the Sun Sentinel editorial page. Justin Safey, a leader, I think, a thought leader in Miami and South Florida, and Marlon Hill, attorney, good citizen extraordinaire. Rosemary, the Sun Sentinel editorial, the lead editorial this morning, is on the American Health Care Act. It points out many of the shortcomings of this act, possible ramifications, and it calls out Marco Rubio and says, you and your fellow senators are getting a flawed bill. Either fix it or block it. So explain, what is your point of view?
Well, first, it was such a surprise for so many that the House this week passed this bill. I mean, after a defeat just a couple weeks ago, here's a whole new effort to reform healthcare in America that was done within a couple weeks without people really understanding what's in it. And when you see what's in it, for a lot of people, it does not meet the promise that it's going to be better and more affordable. But it was a legislative win that the House, is going back and running on, and the president wanted. So now it goes to the more deliberative Senate. And thank heavens they're talking about an overhaul. Senator Nelson says, given the cuts, the millions of people that will lose care, older people will get to be charged 5 times more than younger people. Pre-existing conditions, maybe, maybe not, can't support it. But absent in the number of voices we've heard in the debate is Senator Marco Rubio, who we hope will play a leading role in standing up for Floridians and getting a bill that addresses the problems with Obamacare, but doesn't hurt millions and millions of people.
Well,
as the protective husband of a kidney transplant recipient and a 2-time breast cancer survivor, I get very, very frustrated, and I lose the opinion maker hat, because when you look at states' rights versus people's rights, this is a priority issue that all of Congress should be working on for the good of America. And the senator doesn't represent the local district. So Senator Rubio does not represent West Miami anymore. He represents 90 million citizens that want to be healthy and to be with their family members.
And 1.7 million Floridians are enrolled in the Affordable Care Act. And whether it's an imperfect health insurance plan or not, they get something out of it. And Justin, people don't want to lose the safety, the security, and the health care they get under it.
Right, they don't. And look, this is a very complicated issue. Obamacare had some things that were touted that didn't turn out to be true, like the famous, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Premiums are skyrocketing, insurers are pulling out of it. So Obamacare, I think even Democrats, I hear Democrats on television all the time say there does need to be change. There are some things about that need to be fixed. They aren't working correctly. So then once you start to change it, well then what are those changes and how do you change it? People like the comfort of it, but at the same time, if you've only got one insurer that you can choose from, and if your premiums are skyrocketing, that's not an option either as well. So I think that the Senate is, I really have to take a moment, I think I did this on a previous show, where you have to just give credit to the founders of our country and the Constitution. They have a House of Representatives and they have a Senate, and the Senate is the more deliberative body. And I think as a result, if they can work out a compromise, we're going to have hopefully a product that will be able to accommodate people that don't want to lose the benefits they have of Obamacare, but they will address the problems that Obamacare has.
Well, they're going to take months to do this. And they have said, Lamar Alexander from Tennessee, who's one of the leaders, have said, we may just rewrite the whole thing.
And we should, Michael, take the time to do that. We should have repeal, replace, repair, improve. Get it done.
Susan Collins, senator from Maine, was on with George Stephanopoulos just prior to this program and said the Senate is going to start from scratch. There will be nothing about the House bill in the Senate. It's going to take a very long time. But you know what I think is worth remembering is 7 years ago, when Obamacare was being rolled out, there was a huge backlash by the very people who then bought into it and love it. So is there a thought to, well, let's see, there are problems with Obamacare. People like your wife with pre-existing conditions, Paul Ryan, House Speaker, on television this morning said, we will not leave them behind. There are
but these high-risk pools.
Yeah.
They didn't work before.
So the answer is states' rights. Like a woman with breast cancer in Florida is different from a woman with cancer in Georgia. But okay, Florida would get to decide whether or not what it requires insurance companies to put into their policies includes coverage of pre-existing conditions. If Florida decides, no, you don't have to do that in Florida, then Florida does have to create a high-risk pool that offers insurance to those who can't get it on the private plan. When we tried that before, and we have tried it before, the amount of those policies were 250 times greater than what was on the plan. The deductibles were huge. What it covered was really low. Lifetime benefit was only $500,000, and it collapsed. So let us learn from what we've tried before, and let us not leave people with pre-existing conditions on their own, because who doesn't have a pre-existing condition?
So Justin, is there a concern that the bulk of money going to Florida will not be dispersed the way people need it based on experience in Florida?
Right. Well, I think that's a question that's unknown at this time. And I think that the issue is that the Republicans in Congress would say the leaders in each state can be held accountable by their voters. I heard someone say, well, in New York, we know that they're going to do everything they can because the leaders of New York, and I honestly think the same thing about the leaders in Florida. I don't think that the leaders in Florida are going to make bad decisions for the health care of this. Now, you can disagree with...
They didn't take Medicaid
you can disagree with... you can disagree with me, but then the voters can hold those people accountable. The whole notion that Washington knows best, I think, is not a notion that I would support. And I think that that's the problem with the construct of let's just let Washington make all these decisions for everybody and let's take it away from the states and let's not give the states any say-so. I think let's give it a chance. Let's see what the Senate comes up with and let's see if their reforms are better than Obamacare, because we know Obamacare is not working.
But the whole notion, Justin, that Washington may not have all the answers, or even Tallahassee, right? The notion that people want is government needs to find an answer, being the enabler to solve these things.
Absolutely.
You know, we can't just punt it away and have people just make these decisions when you have people lying in a hospital bed trying to figure out real issues that are going on in people's
Agree,
lives.
and I think the Republican Congress didn't simply repeal Obamacare, or at least the House, they replaced it with something. So they're not washing their hands of the problem. They have a solution that they're putting forward.
I talked to both Carlos Curbelo and Mario Diaz-Balart, two fine members of Congress, both Republicans who voted for this bill. And essentially, if you listen closely, they both said, boy, the bill we passed stinks. I had to vote for it, and here's hoping the Senate fixes it. I mean, what a position to be in. I mean, that's pitiful.
Well, you know what they say about...
It's all men, by the way, too, who have been appointed to this Senate committee that's going to forge a plan. I mean, the voices of women ought to be heard in what our health care plan is going to look like. So I'm disappointed by that, too.
Yeah. Before we run out of time, we have to talk about what is really an interesting development this week in the Florida governor's race next year, and that is we had two powerful, I think maybe the ones who are going to wind up as their party's nominees, Gwen Graham, a Democrat, former congresswoman from Tallahassee, and State Agriculture Commissioner Adam Putnam. And Justin, I wouldn't be surprised if they wind up as the nominees, and they both are intelligent, capable people.
Right, very intelligent, very capable. Obviously, former Congresswoman Graham, her father was a former senator, U.S. senator from the state of Florida, Florida governor. Adam Putnam was a member of Congress, has served as an agriculture commissioner. Both have a lot of experience, both have records of accomplishment. But what's interesting, if you look at who we've been electing previously, Rick Scott is our governor, Donald Trump is our president. The voters have spoken recently, and the fact that that you don't have a record of accomplishment, the fact that you haven't had public service before, isn't necessarily what the voters are looking for. If you look at what our elections have yielded.
Well, the voters, if I may say, the voters spoke over very limited choices or a selection process that was.
I wouldn't discount Andrew Gillum from Tallahassee as well. I think the voters are going to have a great mix of folks going into 2018, and with the dynamics of what's happening in Tallahassee tomorrow with the budget and the Speaker of the House and those dynamics there. 2018, you thought you had a timeout last year in November? You better
there are no more
times
ready. Out.
Yeah. Right? A lot of balls in the air in that governor's race and everything else. Rosemary and Justin, Marlon, thanks for coming in. Great discussion.
As always.
All right, when we come back, it looks like homeowners are going to get a chance to vote on their own tax cut. And Glenna's going to talk about this. Is that a no-brainer? Well, we'll find out what she thinks.